Moses goes to Egypt to talk to Pharaoh, but Pharaoh refuses to release the Israelites. He doesn't want to let his slaves and their labor go. Because Pharaoh's heart is hardened time and time again, resisting what God desires to do, God sends 10 plagues over Egypt, each one showcasing the might and power of the one true God. Finally, after the 10th plague, Pharaoh has had enough. He tells Moses to gather all the Israelites and leave. This is where our story continues.
Hey, hi Def. It is so good to see you guys and be with y'all this morning. Man, it has been such a good time so far, and we got a lot more ahead of us. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and dive right in and ask you guys a question. Have you ever experienced a whoa, didn't see that moment coming type of moment in your life? Something you completely didn't expect or could have ever predicted? Well, there's been a few moments for me. Back in college, I would hang out with my best friend. We would talk and dream about our futures together. You know, what kind of person would we marry? What kind of car would we drive? Where would we live? What would our kids be like? What would our pets be like? And I had my dream dog all figured out, and just my whole map of my life figured out, right? Well, one day, whenever we got together to hang out, my friend shows up with the most adorable puppy in her arms, and she gives and hands it over to me. This black and white Australian Shepherd puppy, the exact dog that I wanted. And that was, whoa, didn't see that coming in the best possible way. Well, there's also been other moments, like when I was 17 and driving my first car. When I was 17, I just thought I was hot stuff, right? But I drove a 2006 gray Mazda 6, and I loved having my independence, would be able to drive around. And so one night, I'm driving down a main road, probably going, 50 in a 45, that's average. And so I am just cruising along, probably listening to my tunes on real CDs, right, in the car. Probably either some John Mayer or Coldplay or Usher, something like that. And so I'm driving, I'm in the left lane and minding my own business, having a good time. What I didn't realize was that my lane was turning into a left turn only lane. And so right in front of me was a hard curb, right there in front of me. And I nailed that curb going about 50. Instantly, my left two tires popped and the whole underside of my car and suspension just got so messed up. And so there I was, stranded in the middle of this median, embarrassed, shocked, confused, everything. And I'm thinking, wait a second, I was going from everything was great 1 second to now, how did I get here? That was a whoa, didn't see that coming kind of moment. But then, as I grew up, life started to just throw different kind of curveballs at me. But backstory, as I grew up, I tried to make good decisions in life. For the most part, I tried to follow the rules. I mostly made it home in time for curfew. When I was in high school, I started leading some middle school girls at my church. I went on a bunch of mission trips. I didn't tell any boyfriend I love you until I knew for sure that he was the one that I was gonna marry. Well, I graduated high school, went to college, and then decided that I was being called into full-time ministry. So I went to seminary to study the Bible and theology and get ready for that. And then that led me here to Preston Trail back in 2012. And then I met my now husband, Jacob. He proposed to me on the roof of this building, and we got married across the hall in the backyard theater. And things were great at the time. Well, why do I tell you this? Because I tried to be good and I tried to do good. But then, whenever it came time for us, after we'd been married for a little while, to start trying to grow our family, it just wasn't happening. And it led to us being a little confused. And so the months turned into years of us waiting and wondering and asking and praying and hoping. And then I had to watch all my other friends starting to get married and grow their families and watching their dreams come true. But for me, nothing, just a roadblock. And so, man, ended up going to the doctor, and after many, many doctor appointments and tests, the doctor told us that we would not be able to conceive and have a child without medical intervention. And even then, after a few surgeries, a lot of medicine, and dozens of daily shots, it was not a guarantee that it would be successful. And so, guys, that was my just most devastating, earth-shattering type moment that I've experienced, hearing that kind of news, picturing my biggest dream and thinking it's just crashing right in front of me. And it hurt, and it was hard, and it led me to thinking and wondering and praying, why? Why, God? I tried to do good. I tried to honor you with my life, and I'm praying for something that seems good and seems honorable, right? But it's just not coming true for me. It's not working for me. Why am I up against this roadblock? And honestly, guys, it made me ask the question, okay, well, God, are you good? If this is what I'm up against, are you actually good? And man, those are some tough questions to wrestle with. But moments like that can have us asking the question, is God good enough? Is God good enough to handle my circumstance and to get me through the circumstance that I am facing? Can he make it better? And will he, frankly, make it better? Well, as we're going to continue to consider these questions, we're going to dive back into the story of Moses in the book of Exodus. We're going to pick it back up in chapter 13, just as Jackson talked about last night. And as you heard just a second ago, Pharaoh here finally decided after 10 plagues to let Moses and all of the Israelites go, set them free from slavery. Now, it had been 400 years that they had been in slavery, but now they finally can start moving and go. And guys, whenever you picture this crowd, don't just picture like a crowd this size right here, but instead, as Jackson said, there were over 2 million people. It said 600,000 men, and then you add the women and the children, so it's over 2 million. Now, guys, the most people I have ever seen is about 100,000 at the Texas A&M football stadium, Kyle Field. Yeah, and I thought that was a lot because that's impressive and amazing. But, guys, this kind of crowd is massive. Okay, so that's where we're at. So now the people are walking and they're moving. They're taking with them as much as they can possibly carry. They got all their families, they got their livestock too, and they're going as fast as they possibly can. Because when Pharaoh finally lets you go, you move, you don't delay, and you go, right? So they're on their way now. They're going in a direction that they had never been before, but God is with them every step of the way. It says that as they were going, the Lord led them by a pillar of cloud. Now, we don't exactly know what this looks like, but here's kind of an artistic depiction. So don't just picture a little bitty puffy white cloud in the sky, right? This is more like from ground until like sky, huge, massive, again, to guide this giant crowd. And so they're following the pillar of cloud by day, and then at nighttime, because it's a long journey, the pillar of cloud turns into a pillar of fire. And that fire gave them light so that they could see where they're going. And it also signified the Lord's presence, so that as they followed this symbol, they were following the Lord. The Lord was guiding them ultimately to the promised land, but to where they should go. And time out, side note, I kind of wish that God would make it this clear for me. Right? Like whenever I'm making a decision, like should I go this way or that? Should I do this or do that? That there would just be something so obvious and right in front of me that I'm like, oh yeah, he's right there. That's the answer. Yeah, I mean, right? Like I'm just a little bit jealous of the Israelites here. But anyways, I digress. So the Israelites are following the Lord's guidance, and now they're getting close to the Red Sea. So you can see that they are leaving Egypt. They're heading towards Israel, which the promised land is this way. But they have to cross kind of the Red Sea. So there's a lot kind of in their way. That's the direction that they're going. So finally they get close to the shore of the Red Sea. It's evening, and so it's getting late. And so they start to set up camp for the night. They're getting settled in, but then all of a sudden they look up And way out in the distance, they can see the Egyptians charging towards them. You see, Pharaoh had actually changed his mind, and he regretted his decision to let all of his forced labor go for free. And so he rounded up all of his best army troops. And that's crazy. And so it says that there were 600 chariots and horses. And each chariot had 2 men, one to steer and one to fight. And these were like the armored war tanks of the time. They're big and they're bad, and they are furiously heading after them. And so when the Israelites see this, guys, this is like their oh crap moment, right? Like, oh yeah, they see what is happening, and this clearly is not the way that it is supposed to go. Well, we're gonna take a look at what the Israelites do and how they respond. So we're picking up in Exodus 14, starting in verse 10. So Pharaoh's approaching, the people look up and they panic. And this panic, guys, I'm gonna talk about kind of the 5 steps of their downward mental spiral, okay? And as I'm saying these, maybe you can relate to the feelings that they are feeling and the way that they're expressing them. Because here, when they panic, and even continuing on in the next verse, it says they cried out to the Lord. And so their first response is in fear. And probably screams, right? That's what I would do. And then next, they even get angry. And they are directing that anger toward Moses. It says, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? They are mad at him. And so the fear turns to anger. And the anger then turns to meltdown and starting to think of catastrophe. You know, weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? And so they are just, they're spiraling. They're thinking of all the questions, like what is going on? This is bad. And they just keep thinking of worst case scenario. Well, next that leads to even doubts. It says, it's better to have been a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. Man, they regret leaving. Man, we would have been better off over there. We should have just stayed. Man, they're regretting it big time. And lastly, we see that hopelessness and despair, where they can see no outcome possible that is better than their current situation. And guys, I think some of you maybe can relate to being in a situation where you feel so trapped, so stuck, so hopeless that you see no positive outcome in front of you. And so let's ask the question, if that's what you feel, like the odds are so stacked up against you, where do you go from here? If you're feeling that fear and anger and regret and maybe even shame and hopelessness, where do you go from here? Well, I think it's moments like this that can really just feel like our whole world has just dropped and shattered around us. And frankly, when we're surrounded by shards of glass, it is just devastating and painful. And so what I think God was wanting to say to the Israelites then and to us today is that there is a more beautiful picture ahead if you just hold on. Students, don't miss this. Every broken piece of your lives is used for something greater. It's a beautiful, masterful mosaic where no piece goes to waste. So the question is, do you trust him? Do you trust that God is enough for you? Well, the beauty of the gospel is that we don't have to just keep trying to do more and be more, to be good enough, because God is already enough for us. And the way out of a trap isn't trying, it's trust. And we're gonna see that even more in the story. So going back to Exodus 14, we're gonna look at Moses' response and see how he responds to the people's mental spiral and freak out. So he answered the people, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Whew. So when things feel bad, sometimes I think we're tempted to want to do more, to try to grab a hold of the situation, grab control, and try to fix it, right? Well, I'll tell you guys a little spoiler for back to my story, is that the Lord has blessed me with 3 amazing kids. And my oldest is Levi. He's 3.5. He's just adorable. And I love this stage. He's a lot of fun. And he is learning how to put his clothes on by himself and how to take them off by himself, which is great independence. Love it. And he loves to do everything all by myself, right? And so literally just a few days ago, he is trying to take off his shirt. And it's a little tight on him. He's kind of a big guy. And so he's trying to take it off. And he's pulling, and he's pulling. And then, the cuffs on his long sleeves are tight. And so he just keeps pulling more and more and more and get it over his head, and it's now stuck on him. And he is now just like screaming and fighting it and yelling, but he doesn't want me to touch him. And so I'm just like, okay, hey, buddy, I'm right here. Okay, buddy, I can help you. Would you just trust me? Would you just be still? Whew, I said those words, and that's when, oh my gosh, guys, it hit me. That's exactly, I think, what God says to us. Would you just be still? I think I needed to hear that. Would you just be still before sabotaging that relationship? Would you just be still before running away when it gets hard? Before jumping to new conclusions? Before opening your mouth? Before trying on your own and just making matters worse? Would you have the patience to slow down and wait for God and His timing? Even when it may feel or seem like His response is delayed, or even like that you run into a roadblock, maybe the answer isn't jumping ship on your faith when it feels like God is playing against us. And speaking of playing against, I used to play basketball all throughout middle school and high school. It's my favorite sport. Shout out to All Stars. But I love basketball. Sometimes, guys, we would play against these other teams that it just seemed laughable how small they made us feel, how silly they made us feel because they were so much bigger than us, so much better than us. And we would see them and be like, oh no, really, we're playing them? Nah, we should just forfeit, right? Well, here's one thing that I know. Whenever you're playing against the undefeated MVP, man, you play different. So I don't just keep going in for layups over and over again if I know that the girl against me who's twice my size is about to stuff my shot, block me, and make me look like a fool. I'm just not gonna keep doing that. If the undefeated MVP is on my team, I pass her the ball. And I see what she is about to do with it. But guys, I think some of us are maybe playing like that MVP is on the other team. And maybe we're too scared or nervous or anxious to even get in the game. But what if you knew that he was on your team? Guys, you would play different. Romans 8:31 tells us, if God is for us, who can be against us? This isn't an if, like if this was true. This is an if-then statement implying what is therefore true. And so because God is for us, who can be against us? What do we have to fear? What do we have to be scared about? And students, I think that's what God wants to tell you, is that God is for you. He's not playing against you. He wants you to be happy. He wants you to succeed. He has good plans for you and for your life. But man, let's be honest, right? Sometimes it feels like God is just going off script, like he just isn't taking the obvious path. Like, okay, but if I'm praying for a certain situation in my life, I think that if God's gonna answer my prayer, he's gonna do it this way, right here, okay? And if he doesn't do it this way, like, God, where are you? I don't see you because you're not right here. And so sometimes God's working somewhere completely else, and we just don't see him. And it can feel like God is being disobedient to our prayers and how we want him to answer us. Like whenever he allows us to go through pain and suffering and hardship, like, God, what are you doing, right? But a common misconception of Christianity is that if I follow Jesus, he'll make my life easier and smoother. Well, friends, that's just not true. The Bible never tells us that our lives will be easier if we follow God. Guys, it's in fact quite the opposite. Jesus tells us that we will have hardship. In John 16, it says, in this world, you will have trouble. This isn't just some of us, this is everyone. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus has already conquered the biggest obstacle there is, which is death. He's already conquered it. And so we can expect the hard things in life. We can expect that at some point or multiple points in our life to hit us. But here's the thing about God is that he is for you and he will always show up, and in just the right timing, but sometimes in just unimaginable ways. So God won't always remove your roadblock, but he will provide a way for you to get through it. Don't miss that, guys. He won't remove your roadblock always, but he will provide a way. So keep holding on, because your roadblocks, your not enoughs, and your disappointments are about to run smack dab into God's protection and provision. And so let's go back to the story and look at what happens next. The Lord, back in Exodus 14, speaks to Moses, and he's telling him, it is time to get moving. It is time to pick it up with all the people and move. He gives them instructions. He says, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna pick up your staff. You're gonna raise it over the sea. You're gonna divide the waters. So you're gonna walk through it on dry ground. He is telling this to Moses. He says he's gonna harden the hearts of the Egyptians, that they're gonna charge after them, and his great glory will be displayed so that all will know that I am the Lord. God is telling him what's about to happen, like revealing, here's the plan, all right? Well, then God moves. And that pillar of cloud that was in front of them, right? That pillar of cloud moves behind them. And it is now acting as a barrier between the Israelites and the oncoming Egyptians. It is now protecting them. And so where the pillar of cloud and the Lord was their guide, he is now their guardian. And so the Israelites now have to wait on the Lord's next move. It's time for them to be still and see what the Lord is about to do. And so they wait. And as they wait, the minutes turn to hours and the daytime turned to nighttime. And as the darkness settled in, the pillar of cloud changed into a pillar of fire. It provided the only light that night, an orange glow that softly rested on their faces and reflected on the water. Moses slowly walked forward to the edge of the shore and did just as the Lord instructed him to do. He grabbed his staff and raised his arms high above his head, and instantly things shifted. The Lord caused a sudden gust of wind from the east to blow, and it picked up stronger and stronger, intensifying with purpose. And as the wind touched the sea, the waters began to churn and slosh, flowing and circling in incomprehensible ways. And then, as if responding to divine command, the water slowly began to separate and recede, like pulling back curtains on both sides, revealing a corridor of dry land, a pathway of deliverance. When a collective gasp of awe rippled through the crowd. And so, the waters continued to build on both sides, higher and higher, creating walls of waves suspended in place by none other than a divine hand, the same creator of water itself. And as nature continued to respond to the command of its master for the entire expanse of the sea, the Lord made a away. Immediately the people roared and cheered, celebrating, followed by the rush of footsteps, both people and animals, echoing through the majestic tunnel as they journeyed across. But soon after, the Egyptian army resumed their desperate pursuit, charging right after them onto the same miracle pathway. But then midway through, the Lord threw the chariots into confusion, twisting the wheels, spooking the horses, and igniting chaos. And so just as dawn was approaching, Moses lifted his arms once again, and the walls of water came crashing down on top of the Egyptians. And as the sea returned to its calm, God's people stood on the other side, quietly in awe from witnessing God's power, protection, and provision. Can you feel it? Can you imagine what they felt? How on the other side of the Red Sea, all of their worries and anxieties and fears just dissolved because God was working all along. He had a plan all along. And God showed off in a way that was undeniably a divine interruption. And so what do we learn from this story? We learn that God is for them. And students, what I want you to know is that also God is for you. The God of the universe is for you. The God who has the power to break the laws of nature, who can create dry ground where there was none before, who can defy physics, who can do the impossible and change circumstances. That God is for you. Do you trust him? Do you believe it? And let's be honest, some of you guys are in a Red Sea moment right now where things just feel stuck and impossible, and it's your roadblock. Like maybe you never imagined that you would be in the family situation that you're in right now. Or maybe years ago, when you used to picture your life right now, you never pictured it the way that it is currently going. And you know, I've been there, maybe not exactly where you're at, but I've been in a place of thinking that my life is not going how I pictured it going. And I was thinking, you know, man, God, I've even tried to be good and it's not going the way that I thought it would go. You're not answering my prayers the way I thought you would answer my prayers. I feel like I've done a series of good things and, you know, been a decently good person, but God, where are you? But man, silly me, really silly me, to think that I could ever be good enough for a holy God. Like I couldn't earn God's favor and blessing in my life. Man, God is already enough for me. He's already all the way for me. We just, like my theology was all wrong. Instead, like we just love God. And out of an overflow of that love for God, then maybe the effects are doing good for the people around us too. But what I know is that God is always on our side. He never leaves us. If we keep holding on, he's fighting for us and working on our behalf. And so I saw a quote from one of my favorite pastors in a book that I read called Disobedient God. It's by Albert Tate. He says it this way: there are no shortcuts to developing strong faith. This means that walking with Jesus doesn't erase the painful moments in life. In fact, walking with Jesus means that rejection and suffering are sure to come. But it is these exact seasons that strengthen your faith. It is in these moments that you see God most clearly. And I hope that is true for some of you, that even in this season that you maybe can, God's working. He is for me. Maybe I don't see him the way I thought I would see him, but I hope some of you are now seeing him in a new and different light. And students, guys, if there's some of you out there who just aren't, like you look at your life and your journey so far and you don't have a story of pain and suffering and hardship, that's great, right? Praise God for that. And so if that's you, what I want to tell you, students, is to keep strengthening your faith. Keep strengthening your faith, because we don't stay on mountaintops for long. And on the other side of the mountain is a valley, and we're going to need to pack as much hope and confidence and courage to journey through that valley. Psalm 23:4 says, even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. Just like Jackson said last night, the Lord is our shepherd. He protects us, he is with us, and he gives us the confidence. Like, how could we possibly have that kind of confidence if we're walking through something dark and hard, the unknown? It's because we know that he is with us. And not just anyone who's with us, the God of the universe, who is the most all-powerful, that can do anything and is on your side. He is for you and with you. And I hope that gives you the confidence to know that you can make it through it. And so, students, the one thing that I want you to know this morning is that because God is for you, keep holding on. So I want to ask you, what's your Red Sea moment? What's the Red Sea moment in your life? The one thing that's maybe a roadblock in your life, and the thing that maybe is even tempting you to give up and let go on your faith. Whatever your Red Sea moment is that you have in life, whatever that is in your mind right now, do you believe that God is enough to get you through it? It's questions that you're gonna have to think about and process, and maybe even talk with your leader or small group today. But we're gonna give you guys another moment to reflect, just like we did last night. And guys, in this moment, I just want stillness. I don't want anyone leaving the room. I don't want anyone getting up. If you wanna journal and write, do that. If you just wanna sit and pray, do that. But let this 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, guys, be between you and the Lord, talking to him. And if you can't identify a Red Sea moment in your life, then use these 2 minutes to thank God and praise him for who he is and ask him to strengthen your faith even more so you'll be prepared. But think about this. Let's all use this time well. Let's do some heart work.